talking about risk 8.1, which is the devolution risk. So just to ask members if you have any further questions about this in relation to the risk register. So I've got Stephen and Vanessa.
Thank you. So I'll try and cut it short then. So with these burgeoning unitaries, burgeoning mayoralties, are there any whisperings of this authority going as part of that process? And I think it's important, as Tim said, that we're not off the radar, that we do whatever we need to do to make sure that does not come to pass.
Yeah, definitely. I have certainly not heard anything, and Vanessa was shaking her head. We're not off the radar or off the agenda. We might be slightly off the radar and all at the bottom of the list, but we definitely have had no indication that national parks would be adversely affected, would be affected by this in terms of existing. Now, you know, how we fulfill our role and how we work with any potential new arrangements is really open for us to influence with working closely with partners, which is why I think it was important to identify a senior member of the team to lead on that and to hold the ring and to make sure that Tim, in our case, will be the person who can see what's happening on both sides of the border. Vanessa.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, absolutely what Tim said, you know, we've just got to raise our profile, and that's something that myself and Sean are doing in terms of having one-to-one conversations with chief execs and leaders of the councils, just to kind of like just get in and have those conversations, because it's vitally important for us as National Park Authority to be a non-constituent member of the strategic combined, the mayoral combined county authority, the CCA. And if we could get a voting right with that, that would be great. Apparently you can. There is an opportunity to be given it, but we should really be on that as being such a key planning authority across that area, and in terms of delivering on the environment and climate work, which is one of the things that comes under the mayoral thing. And that's why I'm really trying to go to Jim McMahon at MHCLG, and if there's anything, like Tom, I really would like, let's pick that up offline, and you need to meet Sean. It's a shame he's not here today, but yeah, we should get a meeting together and just like chat this through, because anything we could do to help, that would be amazing, because it is, I think it's an oversight. I do because we sit under DEFRA, but it's something that we've really got to kind of get in and be assertive and confident about. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, Tim.
Would it be possible for us in doing that to offer to represent the other protected landscapes in the southeast as well?
Yeah, I mean
Sorry.
Yeah, well, as you know, because you sit on the Transport for Southeast representing all the protected landscapes, don't you? I mean, I know that Sean is having these conversations with other protected landscapes and how we can work together. I mean, there's a whole... I'm on the Protected Landscape Partnership Board, and I've got a board meeting coming up soon on that, so I could try and see if that, but it's kind of not in that remit at the moment. It's trying to work out what it is, but actually that's what that should look like, partnership working. But yes, I think we had a workshop recently where we really, those of you that were there, we did go into quite a lot of thinking about what the opportunities could be through devolution. So I think we have done quite a bit of work on that, and I think Jerry's right, it's like we've got to wait to see what these things now turn into before we kind of do any more thinking on it, I think.
Yeah.
And just to establish ourselves as a kind of player, is that the right word? But you know, we're there. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Laura.
Just very quickly, to your point, Tim, we have definitely been, all of us, I think, in different ways, been reaching out to other organisations, National Landscapes in particular for me. So it started with Surrey Hills and moved on to Chichester. I'm going to Wealdon next. And the idea is recognising that they don't have the same sort of level of infrastructure and capacity building in their teams, and what could we do together that could be really important. But actually in this scenario that we're talking about right now, we could have a unified voice on that front, couldn't we? At the moment, because I sit in CPM, so I'm not in that elevated status. I'm talking about dog walking and how to influence that in a positive way. But actually, the ultimate goal is being a joined up voice. You know, starting with something small and building on that, so we can be friends and work together effectively.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, colleagues, I'm going to move us on then. So can I ask for your approval for the fact that we have received and considered the risk register? Thank you very much. Thank you all. Item 15 then, we have our budget monitoring report as of month 9. There's just one clarification I wanted to ask of Nigel before we get into the meat of this, and I ask you to introduce. Under recommendation 3, it says approve capital variations as set out in Appendix 2A. And from my looking at the report, there's 2 pages that are labelled Appendix 2. And I just wanted to double check whether it was the whole of Appendix 2 or just the second page. They're pages 217 and 218 in the pack.
Yeah, I think it is meant to be referring to page 218.
218, thank you. Yeah, great. Okay, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is the budget monitoring report up to Q3, which is up to the end of December. As you can see, it indicates a below budget variance of 159,000. And that's a shift of, or an improvement of 166,000 since we had the last public report at Q2. You can see in summary that there are a number of pressures across some of the expenditure headings in corporate services of around 100k, together with the financial impact of bringing the trading company back in, which is estimated at a 280k pressure. However, those are offset by staffing underspends across countryside and policy management, but also the planning service. And in the appendix, you will see also that in planning, there are lower than anticipated costs of consultancy in relation to the development plan. Although planning incomes are down, as mentioned in the report, again, as we've been discussing, they've been offset by reduced payments under the delegated planning arrangements, which has largely negated that downturn. The report notes that the options for the authority to manage the Seven Sisters pressure, some of which is not yet finalised, and I think it's in paragraph 3.6, you have more information about potential pressure of 349k in that respect. We won't know the detail or the confirmed figure for that until outturn, because there's an awful lot of transactions between the company and the authority that need to wash through. But that is the sort of scale of potential pressure that we're talking about after you've recovered your equity investment from the company, which will help to offset those costs. Yeah, the possibilities for managing that at year end are obviously if there's further underspending this year, that will help to assist to manage that position. Otherwise, it's a case of looking at use of working balance or reserves, which is fine in principle, but obviously that then may need some decisions around, well, will you have to curtail some spend in next financial year to manage that, or to repay the working balance to restore it to the recommended level? But there's a lot of water to go under the bridge, I think, before we get to a final position on that, and hopefully it will be managed within the current year's financial resources. In terms of capital, the Appendix 2A that isn't, but is on page 218, does highlight that there are some delays and some schemes are going to flow over into 25-26 financial years. So you're being asked to approve some reprofiles just to make sure the capital budget then matches when the spend is expected to happen. And just finally on treasury management, you'll see that there's now over £20 million of cash is being invested in various instruments, and up to quarter 3, the investment return achieved was about 4.98%, which tracks very close to the benchmark of 5.01%. We will probably start to fall slightly behind the benchmark because we are, in theory, in a falling interest rate period if that trend continues, and therefore as your higher rate investments mature and fall out, obviously the returns will start to dip, but the benchmark tends to react more slowly. I think I'll leave it there. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Nigel. Any questions on the paper, any aspects of it? Stephen.
Nigel, could you explain a little bit more why we're still, hopefully, your word, waiting for the end of the year regarding the Seven Sisters Country Park costs? I'm just a bit concerned they've not been tracked if we are, we're just sort of keeping our fingers crossed that it's all going to be okay.
I may ask Vicky to come in on some of that. She's probably closer to it than me, but clearly there's a lot of billing going on between the two organisations, and it's really just washing that through. But also there is some recovery of income and debt that the Seven Sisters Country Park needs to do as well. So we may or may not understand that position till year end, because there may be some bad debt within that, for example, or they may not recover all of that. So there are various issues to be resolved.
Any other questions or comments? Can I just ask a question? I may have missed something here. Under 3.9 on page 207, the table there gives us capital budget year to date, month 9, and then Appendix 2 gives capital forecast, but has month 9 column in there as well. And the 2 month 9s, the variance looks to be different. Am I missing something here? I don't know if I need to point you to both pieces again. So one's on page 207, the table at 3.9, and the other is page 217, Appendix 2.
I think it is because one is a variance to date to give you a sense of how much cash has been expended to date.
Right.
The other one is an outturn forecast for the year.
Forecast out, right, okay, thank you. So would that mean then, on an Appendix 2, 346, that's carried forward to the 25-6 budget to pay for these things, the things that are in red, because they're not going to happen in this financial year? Or is it that they're not going to happen at all? And that's...
If they were not going to happen at all, they would be declared as an underspend, but most of them are reprofiling, which is in 2A that isn't.
Okay, right, thank you.
Which shows you those that need to be, where the budget needs to be carried forward to next year to cover spend that will flow into next year.
Yeah, okay, thank you. No, I was just making sure I could see where all the different bits sat. All right, thank you. So can I just draw your attention, colleagues, then to the following page, page 218, which is Appendix 2A. This is where we have to approve these changes or adjustments, and many of them are about extending the project through into 25-6. So I'm just making sure everyone's seen it before you vote on the recommendations. So if there's any questions anyone has on those, I'd be grateful for them before we vote. And while you're having a look at that, I'll just say it has been very nice to be operating in terms of treasury management in a position where we have managed to earn some money. Obviously, as you say, Nigel, that's quite likely to start to tail off. But that has been really well managed, and thanks to the team who managed those investments. I think that's been really helpful. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably the wrong end of the stick on this entirely. The New Barn Cottage improvement works, the reprofile, I think it's 182. One at 182,000, that seems like a lot for a refurbishment, but then perhaps this isn't the time or place to raise that, I'm not sure.
No, I think that's fair enough to ask. I don't know, Vicky, if you can say anything about that or not.
Do you know, I'm not clear on the actual detail of that, but it was approved as part of the carry forward from the previous financial year.
I think it was. Yes, yeah. Richard.
Yeah, so this is more than just a refurbishment of a cottage. Yeah, so it's to bring it up to the refurbishment. The finish level will be to a basic level internally, but the cottage itself is basically falling down under the weight of the current roof. So there are substantial works that need to be done to the cottage to ensure it's safe, doesn't collapse, and then to actually refurbish it.
Okay, thank you. Vanessa.
Yeah, I was going to say, because did that come to MPA in December or P&R last year, didn't it? And Liz
I
came and
thought it was
talked about
MPA,
it.
yeah.
I mean, I just think that sounds cheap to me because, you know, it's a classic.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think it's making it habitable, but
No,
it's making it
not.
safe, isn't it?
No, because it's
Yeah.
falling down. Yeah.
Is it really? Oh, gosh, right. Oh, well, okay, thank you. Okay, colleagues, can I move you then to the recommendation then? We're, as per page 205. Could you please indicate your support for those recommendations? Thank you very much. Thank you all. Right, moving on then. We have, sorry. Right. The audited statement of accounts and letter of representation. So again, Nigel, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously here you have the 23-24 accounts for approval, but you have also got on this agenda a report from the auditor who you'll hear from shortly, which is called the Audit Findings Report, and that's probably the most important aspect of approving the accounts. They are quite difficult to understand. They're quite impenetrable, possibly less or more impenetrable than the Treasury Management Statement, but they are unfortunately presented in international financial reporting standard terms, which you know, is quite difficult to understand why that applies to public authorities, but I'm afraid it does, and so they are necessarily complex. I suppose in the accounts that there is, you know, nothing particularly unusual, but one thing that is in there is a continued net pension asset. I think people who've been following public sector for a long time will be more used to pension deficits, but in the last 2 years they've turned into assets, and that's due to largely the performance of equities in which pension funds invest. Unfortunately, you are not able to realise that asset because the pension fund, of course, could adjust your employer contributions over time, and so it's not realisable within the accounting period, so it's set to zero. But it is worth noting that the pension fund is performing relatively well and is covering your liabilities. The auditor has identified 8 improvement actions for us, which they will cover in detail, but just from our perspective to say that we've accepted those, and you know, that's part of the continuous improvement process around production of the accounts. There are also a number of adjusted misstatements that we've agreed with the auditor, and again, the auditor will go through those, and we've made those adjustments into the accounts. They don't, so far as I understand them, affect your financial position or standing. They are more of a technical nature, but they do ensure that the accounts are presented correctly. I suppose most notably in here, we do have 5 projects that have been identified as having been charged to revenue, but they should correctly be identified as capital expenditure, and that's known as REFCAS. And that doesn't have an impact on the authority's financial position, but it is quite a useful mechanism because it does give the authority the choice of funding such expenditure from either revenue or capital. When it's the other way around, you don't have a choice. And I think that might become important at some point in the future, depending on DEFRA grant announcements and how they structure that between revenue and capital funding. So it's worth noting that that principle has been applied. It is in accordance with the Code of Practice and accounting standards and reporting standards, so it's absolutely compliant and above board, but it has affected the presentation of the accounts. And the only other point to note is that there's a small change to the annual governance statement that has been requested by the auditor, and that is to reflect the change of status of the South Downs Trading Company and the fact that it's been brought back into the authority. And so the annual governance statement has been updated to reflect that change, and you're asked to approve that amendment. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Nigel. And I think it's very helpful that you draw our attention to the 5 projects that have been, in effect, capitalised. Of course, this is for financial year 23-24, so it gives us a helpful precedent then for framing 24-25 and going ahead. I also just want to thank Richard for the amendments to the annual governance statement and to identify for colleagues that they have been highlighted in yellow on page 322, so you can see where the change occurred. Okay, any questions or comments? We're all okay. And everyone could talk me through these accounts then as we go through. Right. No, thank you very much. So can I ask colleagues for you to indicate your agreement to the recommendations? There's 5 points there. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Noted. Right, thank you, Nigel. You're off the hook. Even though I know you'll stay with us for the rest of the meeting. Moving on then to agenda item 17, and delighted to welcome Beth Bowers. Come and sit here. Hello, Beth, and welcome. I know you've been to one of our meetings before, at least, so you kind of know the faces. Thank you very much for both of the reports. Is there anything you'd just like to say by way of introduction to item 17?
Thank you, Chair. I will take the report as read, but I will just highlight a few important pieces to members. So if I start with our headlines page, which is page 344 in the pack, you'll note that we intend to issue an unmodified opinion, i.e. a clean opinion, as we like to colloquially term it. We have identified a number of adjustments, as Nigel has already highlighted in his introduction to the report. They have a net impact per the report that is in the agenda pack of £80,000 to the authority's overall revenue budget. Since that report was drafted, there's been a slight change, and it now, our final position is that there is a £79,000 impact. So clearly a huge change there between the first draft and the updated version, which we will provide upon signing of our opinion. I'm pleased to report that work is now complete. There are a few areas listed in the headlines page that required finalisation. That has happened, and I hope to be able to issue an opinion later this evening after my drive home. So a few other key areas of the report. Materiality remains unchanged from the planning position. Our significant risks also remain unchanged, and there are no significant findings from that work. Again, at the time of drafting the report, the PPE, or the property, plant and equipment valuation work, was noted as in progress. We have not identified any significant issues. We did identify one small estimation difference, but given the large value of those assets, that's not surprising, and we are comfortable with the overall valuation of those properties. The appendices contain a lot of detail, which I'll take as read, but I'm very happy to take any questions that members might have on the report. We have issued one additional recommendation, which will be in our final version of the audit findings report, which we will share with management on providing the opinion, and that can be circulated to members afterwards. That recommendation is that the authority ensures that its valuers are able to provide floor areas and floor plans to support those areas used within their valuations. There were a few where we struggled to obtain evidence in the first instance, so we had to undertake some additional alternative procedures to be able to be satisfied over the valuation. On page 374 of the pack, there is one key area that I wanted to flag that has changed slightly since the version of the accounts that was submitted. Now, again, as I said earlier, there's only a £1,000 difference in the net impact on the budget, but there is a bigger change in terms of the gross impact through income and expenditure. This is in relation to the item that is flagged as an agency error. Now, what we have identified is that actually not all of this money does relate to an agency transaction. There is a small element that does, where the authority has acted as a pass-through for the district council and the county council, but there is a larger element of that cash which the authority itself would be responsible for if the individuals that this particular area of spend relates to are unable to make payments. So it's a very complicated technical piece of accounting that has been concluded over the last couple of weeks. And it all arises from a Section 55 notice, which was served to ensure that works were undertaken on a listed building. And as the authority has the power to do this and the legal obligation to ensure that those listed buildings are kept in the manner to which they should be, it is expenditure and income that should be recognised within the authority's accounts. Now, because both sides are recognised within the accounts, there is very minimal impact on the authority's net budget, but I want to be really clear with members that the income and the expenditure figures are different for that reason. Before I hand back to the chair, I just wanted to put on record my thanks to both colleagues at the National Park and also colleagues at Brighton who have supported the audit process. It has been challenging, and we have identified a number of issues that have required adjustment, and their tenacity and support in being able to conclude those in a timely and efficient manner has been much appreciated. As I said, Chair, I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Beth. Do any colleagues have any questions? I've just got a couple. Oh, sorry, Kat, you go first.
Oh, thank you. This might be a stupid question, I'm not sure. The adjustments you've identified, are some or all of them, have they been going back for years? Or is this as a result of some sort of new accounting legislation and things have been reclassified? I just sort of wondered how they've come up now.
So some of them have been going back for years, and where that is relevant, we have requested that the authority makes an adjustment to previous period sets of accounts. The vast majority of, all of the adjustments barely impact on the revenue budget, so they are presentational adjustments to ensure that items are presented within the right categories, rather than being items that fundamentally change a financial outcome from a previous period. So on page, I just need to find it, page 375 of the pack is where we set out the ones that do have a previous period impact. Anything else is just a current period error that either is due to something particularly technical or is just a human error. There's nothing that's specifically been identified as a result of a change in accounting standards or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I think I was just going to ask a couple of questions of detail. In the action plan, on page 369 of our pack, 29 of your report, Beth, the recommendation about recommend that management review their group structure each year. Is the group structure the organisational structure and therefore how the budget is structured, or is it something to do with having a company and a charity?
So it's the latter, the company and the
okay.
charity. It's just to ensure that as part of any audit process, there is a clear analysis by the authority as to whether or not that those component companies that form part of the group should or shouldn't be consolidated into the financial statements. Okay. I recognise that moving forward with SD.Co being wound down, there will be far less of an impact, but it is an important consideration to make in the meantime.
Okay, no, thank you very much. I think something to just note for Richard and the team, recommendation on page 370 around anti-fraud and corruption policies and codes of conduct, that I note they both need updating, and I assume they'll come to P&R once they've been reviewed so that we can see them.
So the, excuse me, I have to double check where the responsibility sits for approving each of those individual ones. But yes, both of them are, or the Office of Code of Conduct is under review at the moment, and we've already had some discussions over the last few months with Nigel and the team and with Mark as well about inputting into the anti-fraud and corruption policy, which will be updated soon as well.
Thank you. So they'll either come to us or to the NPA.
Yeah, or if they're delegated to officers, then...
Oh, okay. Yes, they could be, couldn't they? Okay, thank you very much. And Beth, a final question for you. The new code that was laid before Parliament, the National Audit Office code that they've set out, said one of the objectives is to ensure more timely reporting of audit work, including value for money. Requires from 2025, auditors will issue their annual auditor's report by November. So we can expect these reports for November this coming year? Question.
So you can definitely expect the auditor's annual report, which is item 18, and I'll come on to that for this past year in a moment. By November this coming year, yes. The audit findings report, we have a little bit longer to be able to deliver that, so it may be that our work concludes in December. Now, if we are sufficiently far enough through our audit that it is worth us bringing an in-progress audit findings report to this committee in November, we absolutely will and can do that.
Okay.
What it will depend on is whether there is enough that we can actually report on, because what I wouldn't want to do is to bring you an audit findings report that effectively says we're about 2 weeks into the audit and not a huge amount has happened. It would be much more effective for us to then report to the next committee. We can, however, in order to be more timely in the future, look to report directly to the authority rather than to this committee, if that would make more sense in terms of timings. So that's something we've already discussed with Richard about the possibility of doing that, because members may be aware the backstop date for signing of local authority accounts will gradually start to move forward over the next few years. So whilst for 2024-5 audits, it will still be February the following year, so February 2026. The next financial year after that, the deadline will move right forward to the end of December. So as an organisation, we are currently trying to put in place that continuous improvement to bring completion dates forward by at least a month, if not 2, in the next cycle. So we will be aiming to conclude by December this coming year.
Thank you. And I guess my question to Nigel and Vicky is this is going to place pressure on finance teams to get year-end closure so the audit can take place, I presume?
Not so much for us, because we have to produce them by May anyway. It is the audit system that is really struggling, and as Beth said, is gradually going to come forward again, back to where it essentially was.
Yeah, no, I was just checking it didn't have a consequent impact on other parts of our finance services, so thank you. Okay, colleagues, then can I ask you please to look at the recommendation for item 17, receive and consider the findings. Could you have a show of hands, please, if you're content that we have done? Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 18. Beth again.
Thank you, Chair. So the second part of the reports that I'm here to present today is our auditor's annual report. This is the value for money output and the second part of our responsibilities, the first being the checking of the draft financial statements. So our work covers 3 areas in value for money. The first is financial sustainability, the second is governance, and the third is what's called the 3 E's, economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Our report includes a commentary, but it also sets out recommendations for the authority to consider. Now, it is worth noting that there are 3 levels of recommendation that can be made by an external auditor. The first is an improvement recommendation. This is akin to a best practice recommendation and something that we perhaps may have seen elsewhere or that we believe might positively impact the authority, but it does not fundamentally undermine the running of that authority. The second level of recommendation that we can make is called a key recommendation. A key recommendation will always come from what we have identified and we believe is a significant weakness within arrangements at an organisation. So this is a higher level of recommendation, and it is more important for an authority to take action quicker than it would be if it were an improvement recommendation. The final level of recommendation that we can make is what is called a statutory or a written recommendation. Under Section 25 and Schedule 7 of the Local Audit and Accountability Act, we have the power to make written recommendations should we deem something to be so significant that it requires the discussion at a full council or a full authority meeting in public in order to address the issue. I'm pleased to report that for this authority, we have only raised improvement recommendations. So we have not identified any areas of significant weakness, nor have we found that there are any things that would warrant a statutory or a written recommendation. Those 4 improvement recommendations can be seen on pages 409 and 410 of the pack. In summary, this is a really positive report, and members should take this in the backdrop of huge challenges that are being faced across all forms of local bodies, across each of those 3 areas that we focus on within our auditor's annual reports. It's also worth noting that, as demonstrated in management's responses, these are all things that the authority is both cognizant of and addressing. As with my previous report, I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Beth. Any questions, colleagues? I think a really helpful summary of the key recommendations and management responses is on pages 23 and 24, or 409 and 410, if you're just having a quick skim to remind you. I can see, I think the management response probably chimes with my question I was going to ask around the benefits of, or the difficulty perhaps, of mapping the corporate risks to strategic objectives, because it's a massive matrix, and a lot of the risks run across so many things that almost the mapping exercise would be of little use, let's say. So that was one recommendation that I would have questioned, but it looks as if the management response is feeling that, we'll have a go. But I think it's just such a complex mix, and we're used to looking at the risk register, we're used to looking at those risks and understanding how they link to the corporate plan. I don't know if it would help us to have them mapped, that's all. Tom? So,
I was going to say that I accept that analysis, but I think based on what we were talking about earlier on, there is now an overall elevated risk environment that we're going to be operating in, where a number of different risks are going to coalesce, and there could be a number of different outcomes. In recent years, we've gone from looking at the risk register as part of these meetings to having a much more fluid discussion between members and officers in between meetings, which I think is a really healthy thing to do. Yeah. I imagine that if we were to pursue this recommendation, it means doing more of that, but what we need is to have a more sophisticated way of understanding what these scenarios look like and how they interrelate. And so it's a sort of continuous improvement for us and the organisation to be able to manage all that as well as, and I think that's probably the what's underlying.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Beth, would you like to say anything?
I was just going to say that as this is an improvement recommendation, it's not something that if the authority were to consider and discuss and determine that actually it's not the most appropriate course of action and it would not add value to the organisation, we are not going to then continue to raise it year after year and continue to recommend that it's something that you do if we can understand the rationale that you have made for making that decision.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Tim.
When we talk about mapping, it does indeed raise a certain amount of bewilderment over the risk of multidimensional matrices and all that kind of thing. And Richard may have a view on this, I'm not sure if we explicitly, in the commentary in our risk register, spell out implications for corporate plan objectives. And without needing perhaps a mapping exercise, it might be just a question of how we phrase it. But we say this might happen and that would be bad, and so there is a kind of evaluation of impact, as of course structurally there is in the register. But in terms of the commentary, we could perhaps cite the corporate plan on occasions to make that linkage between the two without making it a sort of geometrical exercise.
Okay, thank you. Richard.
Thank you. Yes. So when I considered this and considered how useful it might be to members and to us as officers in sort of managing our risks as an authority, initially I was thinking particularly for a larger authority that has a significant amount of risks, understanding how they relate directly to your corporate priorities could be quite important, because you may well end up in a position where you are having to prioritise which risks you address and which risks you just have to kind of manage. For us, we have a lower number of risks than a county council, for example, and we manage them quite tightly through the committee here, through the workshops that Tom mentioned as well. However, it certainly may prove to be useful. So that's why we've said we'll look at this. So when we next see the risk register at the workshop and here at committee later on this year, it will be there will be a sort of map to which of the corporate plan priorities that risk is particularly related to, and I'm sure this will evolve perhaps over the next couple of workshops as members see whether this is of use to you actually in considering the risks, and if indeed there is some commentary that we can perhaps add into the updates in relation to its impact on how we're performing against our corporate priorities.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'm fully supportive then of the management actions in response to the recommendations, so thank you very much for that. Right, colleagues, can I ask then, show of hands, receive and consider the value for money report? All in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you, Beth. Right, and now moving on to internal audit. And we've got Mark and Amanda. Yes. Yeah, I think so. We always had it the other way. Oh. Right, welcome both very much. I'm sorry you have to wait to the end of the agenda again. We were just talking about switching it around actually, but I think maybe we should next time. Okay, so we've got our update on internal audit progress. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. So thank you for having us this afternoon. I'm going to take the progress report as read for this period, but there's a couple of items that I just want to highlight and draw out of this. So we have 2 audits currently in progress for the 24-25 plan, one of which is asset management, where we've just issued our final report, and the other is budget management and main accounting, where we're just undertaking fieldwork at the moment. Once that is completed, we'll have completed our 24-25 audit plan for the year. We have completed 2 audits for this period, one of which is health and safety, and the other is payroll. Both have received substantial assurance, which is pleasing to note. For health and safety, there were 3 findings that were raised. One was a medium risk, and there were 2 low risk findings. And then for payroll, we've raised 1 low risk finding And I just wanted to highlight that the actions from the previous payroll order had been implemented in full. That's all sort of I wanted to draw out of the report. Happy to take any questions, or I don't know if there's anything Mark wanted to add.
We covered it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. So, colleagues, we've got two reports, health and safety, which I briefly referred to earlier. Both of them really pleasing outcomes. I notice health and safety, two recommendations. One is around a statement of intent, which I think makes a lot of sense. And the second was very interesting, was around the fact that there are no performance measures in place for health and safety. So something that we perhaps should look at, and I know the team will look at that, so it'll be coming to us when we review health and safety annually anyway. But if anyone's got any thoughts or comments on effective performance measures that you've seen used in other organisations, I think that could be quite valuable. Payroll, again, likewise really pleasing. When we had our pre-meeting, Mark kindly checked for me that whilst they're not paid, all of the other systems surrounding our volunteer staff are equally as robust as those for permanent staff, so that's good to hear. Any comments or questions on those two? Okay, and it's good to hear the plan's on track with the other two pieces of work. Obviously, we won't hear the outcomes of the accounting and budget management or asset management audits until our next meeting, which won't be till June now, unfortunately. I'll just draw our attention to the actions implemented. We've got the action plan at the end of Report 19, Appendix 3, and you'll recall that there were some actions related to the financial management of project budgets, which I know Vicky's been working on. I wonder if you could just say a few words about progress on that, please, Vicky.
Thank you. Yes, we've designed a pro forma whereby we are populating some of our more complex multi-year projects to test it, and we've passed it by Brighton and Hove to see that they're comfortable with how we're reporting as well. And you should see this reflected in the new report format going forward in the new financial year. And yeah, I'm working on the understanding that we're meeting all those objectives.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks. That's reassuring to know. Any questions? Tim?
Microphone, Tim.
Sorry. This is only for clarity. There's an action summary which gives high, medium and low, and there's one in the medium and two in the low. But I found it quite difficult to make up my mind which one and which two they were from the text. I think 4, 5, 4, 8 and 4, 9 are being referred to, but the numbering in the paragraphs which discusses all this is not carried through into the table and action summary at the end. It would save me 5 minutes, I think, if that were made clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So our reporting format has always been, we take the extract from the actual report that goes, and we provide an executive summary, which is why, and it really upsets me every time that the formatting goes slightly awry, and the font's all wrong because it's a copying and paste from all over the place. So I apologise. I can't believe you tell you how hard we work to make sure it's fine, and I'm sure it's fine when it leaves us. But somehow then I look at this and I'm devastated. So apologies, but that's how it works, and it is a little bit messy and a little bit cumbersome. But what we then do is, full transparency. We're not trying to hide anything from you here. We then report on all the highs and the mediums in the table that follows. I've just noticed, and this is entirely my fault, the health and safety medium priority, we've not actually said is a medium. So if you look on page 428, you'll see that's where the medium action relates to. So it's around an overarching procedure document. And the other two were lows.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Tim. Actually, you drew my attention to the fact there were three recommendations there, and I only mentioned two. Yeah, thank you. And just a question on 4.5 in relation to payroll. This is linking to employee expense claim requests. It was noted by auditors that mileage claims were not supported by VAT receipts. I was just wondering if either Nigel, Vicky or the auditors can tell me, what are we talking about, a big value here, or are we talking about small amounts of money? Oh, is it?
Yeah, we don't claim back VAT on mileage where vehicles are used for business. I mean, if for your fleet, obviously we do,
Yes,
because that's 100% used by the authority, or hopefully. But for business, for people who have a private car that's registered for business, it's very complex.
Yeah, okay.
So you can only claim a proportion of the VAT back related to the proportion used for business. You'd have to monitor that for everybody. In most cases, people use it, when they have a vehicle for business and private, it's majority private use. So, so the council doesn't do it. I don't know. I don't think most councils do that either.
No. Okay.
It is something that we could look at and explore, but it wouldn't be high value, and it could be quite administratively sort of onerous to try and capture that information.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just an assessment of, are we talking about big sums of money here, and is it worth the effort? And I think what you're telling me is probably not. So, yeah. But thank you for the recommendation anyway.
So actually, our finding was around, or our comment was around the fact that, and Nigel sort of countered that point, but if you are claiming VAT, clearly if you haven't got VAT receipts, you might just want to check that you're in compliance with HMRC, because you don't want to get on the end of a penalty or any other sort of payment. But if you're not reclaiming VAT, then actually that becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Okay. No, thank you very much. Thanks for that. Okay, colleagues, so can I ask you please to indicate the fact that you're content with this report, and we're noting progress. Thank you very much. Thanks all. Right, and moving on then to our forward plan, annual plan charter.
Thank you, Chair. So with this report as well, around our strategy, our internal audit plan for 25-26 and our internal audit charter, I'm going to take that as read, but I'm just going to highlight again a couple of key points through that. So with our strategy, it is similar to the ones we presented in previous years and documents and supports the committee in executing their duties around governance, risk management and internal control through the effectiveness of the internal audit function that is being delivered by our service. I would like to highlight there are new global internal audit standards that have come into effect that replace the public sector internal audit standards. Now, we don't anticipate there being a huge change in our processes, and we're currently undertaking a gap analysis. But if there is anything to update committee on regarding this, we will do that, of course. Moving on to Appendix A is our annual plan. So we've considered areas to give full coverage and assurance to committee and the authority with the days that we have available in order to be able to provide an annual opinion at the end of next year. And we've consulted with some members and officers on the draft internal audit plan that we're presenting to you today. And Appendix B is our charter. This remains unchanged from our previous years where we have presented this to committee, and it outlines internal audit's purpose, statutory requirements and responsibilities to yourselves. Happy to take any questions on any of those, or happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Amanda. Members who were at our meeting looking at risk and audit will remember that we looked at the internal audit plan proposed for 25-6, and Mark kindly worked with the senior team to agree that looking at financial management of project budgets would come out of the plan, and what we put in instead was an organisational resilience audit, looking at the impact of savings plans, because I think as members we felt that we know savings could be necessary in the future, and therefore we'd want to make sure that plans were being constructed in the right way, considering all the right elements, so that we have the security of knowing we've got them in case, if you like, that's our plan B, in case our plan A of growing income doesn't come to fruition. So we felt that was a really important switch, so I just draw your attention to that. And that was the reason why I asked Vicky just to give us a brief update on the financial management of project budgets, because I'm confident that the team have that in hand, and that's not something we'd need our internal auditors to look at again. Okay, so just make sure everyone's clear about that. So any questions for the auditors while we have them with us? Okay, right, so can I ask for your agreement then of the internal audit plan, forward plan, and the accompanying strategy and standards? Indication, show of hands. Thank you very much. Thank you both very much for coming. It was very short and sweet, wasn't it? But you were giving us such good reports is not conducive to lots of discussion. So thank you. Yeah, thanks very much. Right, thank you all very much, colleagues. Thank you for your engagement for a long meeting, complex meeting. And I look forward to seeing you all at our away day on the 22nd of April. I now declare the meeting closed.